Today we're talking about a man who didn't just tweak our understanding of the universe, he tore up the old rulebook and wrote a completely new one. We're diving into the incredible story of Albert Einstein, and trust me, it's one of the most game-changing stories in all of human history.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It all comes down to one single dramatic moment. How on earth could a shadow, a simple solar eclipse back in 1919, prove that everything we thought we knew about reality was fundamentally wrong? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back to that incredible day.
So, our story doesn't start in some dusty old lab. Nope. It begins under a darkened sky, with a shadow literally racing across the face of the Earth. This was it, the moment of truth. Let's rewind just a bit. 4 years earlier, in 1915, Einstein had made this absolutely wild prediction that the massive gravity of the Sun would literally bend the path of starlight passing by it. So in 1919, astronomers set out to see if he was right. The stage was set for one of the greatest scientific showdowns of all time.
Now, this mission was a huge gamble, a massive one. They sent two separate teams of astronomers to opposite sides of the world, one to Brazil, the other to West Africa. They were armed with these incredibly delicate cameras, and their goal was to photograph the stars right next to the Sun during the total eclipse. If those stars looked like they had moved, it would mean gravity could bend light itself. And what was at stake? Oh, just the entire foundation of physics built by Sir Isaac Newton more than 2 centuries earlier. No pressure.
So when you boil it all down, it came to this one single, almost unbelievable question. Could light, something that everyone thought was weightless, be pulled and bent by gravity? The answer was going to change everything. To really get why this idea was so completely radical, we need to take a step back. You see, the world of physics at the turn of the 20th century was, well, it was in crisis. The old, comfortable rules just weren't adding up anymore.
For hundreds of years, scientists had this idea that space wasn't empty. They believed it was filled with this invisible, mysterious substance they called the ether. They figured light waves needed something to travel through, just like sound waves need air. The ether was supposed to be that something.
But then, in 1887, 2 American scientists ran this incredibly clever experiment to try and detect the ether. They were trying to measure the Earth's movement through it. And you know what they found? Absolutely nothing. Zip, nada. The ether wasn't there. And just like that, physics had this massive, gaping hole in its most basic understanding of the universe.
And that wasn't even the only headache. Another bedrock law of physics said that matter and energy were two totally separate things. But the new discovery of radioactivity completely blew that out of the water. You had elements like radium just pouring out incredible amounts of energy, seemingly from nowhere. It was breaking the most fundamental rule in the book. So into all this confusion and chaos steps our hero. And he's the last person you'd ever expect. Not some famous professor at a big university, but a young clerk working in a patent office.
His path was anything but ordinary. Get this. Far from being some child prodigy, the young Albert Einstein was so slow to start speaking that his parents were genuinely worried. Using the language of the time, they apparently suspected he might be, quote, retarded, and they were deeply concerned about his future.
And school wasn't much better. He hated the rigid, boring German school system. After he graduated from college, he couldn't even get a teaching job. He had to settle for a simple clerical position in the Swiss patent office. But you know what? It turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to him. It gave him a paycheck, and more importantly, it gave him time to think.
And boy did he think. In what's now called his miracle year of 1905, at just 26 years old, he published his revolutionary ideas. He started with a simple move. He took that bizarre result from the Michelson-Morley experiment that the speed of light is always the same, and he just said, okay, what if that's true? From there, he took a wild leap. If light's speed is the one constant thing, he argued, then everything else we thought was fixed, like time, space, and even mass, must actually be relative. This led him to a truly shocking conclusion. Matter and energy aren't separate at all. They're just two different forms of the same thing.
And that thinking gave us E=mc². It was the answer to that mystery of radioactivity. All that energy wasn't coming from nowhere. It was coming from a tiny, tiny amount of matter being converted directly into a massive burst of energy. Which brings us right back to that fateful day in 1919. Einstein's revolutionary ideas had led him to predict that starlight itself would bend.
And now, the entire world was holding its breath to find out if this patent clerk's vision of the universe was actually real.
After the eclipse was over, the real nail-biting work began. The astronomers had to carefully develop their photographic plates. They measured, with just incredible precision, the exact positions of the stars on their photos, and compared them to star maps of what that same patch of sky looked like normally.
The results were clear. They were undeniable. The starlight had been bent, warped from its straight path, exactly as Einstein had predicted. And the announcement was an absolute bombshell. Literally overnight, Albert Einstein went from a respected physicist to a global superstar. He was instantly hailed as the greatest mind since Isaac Newton himself. He had redefined the cosmos.
But the story doesn't end there with a neat little bow. Because as Einstein's ideas were reshaping the universe, events back here on Earth were taking a dark, dark turn. And his work, tragically, would soon be at the very center of it all.
You have to remember, Einstein was Jewish. In 1933, while he was visiting California, the Nazis seized power back in his home country of Germany. He never went back. The new regime took his property, they held public book burnings of his writings, and he was forced to flee to the United States just to be safe. Then, in 1938, a terrifying breakthrough happened in Berlin. Scientists discovered that you could split a uranium atom, a process called fission. And when they did, it unleashed an unbelievable amount of energy. It was E equals mc squared in terrifying real-world action. The race for the atomic bomb had begun.
Fearing that Nazi Germany would be the first to build this horrifying new weapon, Einstein did something that would alter the course of history. He sent a letter to the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him that atomic bombs were now possible and urging him to act. That letter is what directly led to the Manhattan Project.
So think about that. You can draw a direct, unbroken line from a quiet thought experiment in a Swiss patent office all the way to the dawn of a new and terrifying age for all of humanity.
In the end, Einstein, a man who spent his life pleading for peace, watched as his most profound insights into the fabric of reality became the blueprint for our potential annihilation. Everything that has happened with atomic power, for good and for bad, it all tracks back to the equations of that young patent clerk. And it leaves us with the ultimate question. What's the real legacy of a discovery that can both illuminate the universe and threaten to destroy our world?